Hello and welcome back to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast with me, Jen Curtis. Today I want to talk to you about supplements. So this is something, I made a post a couple of weeks ago about supplements, what to take and what you probably don't need to take. And it was really interesting. The response was really, really interesting. It got a lot of engagement, and I got a lot of pushback from people about certain things that kind of surprised me actually. But mostly the number one thing that I got pushback on was magnesium. So my stance is, as I will go into in a moment, is that not everyone needs to take a magnesium supplement. I was trying to give some very, very general guidelines for just, women of childbearing age, just generally trying to be healthy, for the most part, trying to be fit and strong and get and build muscle and lift weights and all of that kind of thing. But some very, very general guidelines. And I got a lot of pushback for, mainly for magnesium, it has to be said, but for the things that I said that you didn't need, and some pushback for some of the things that I did. So what I want to do in this, as per usual, the social media, it's just the sort of highlights, it's just the headlines. So in this podcast episode, I want to go through exactly what you need to take and why you need to take it or why you should consider taking it. There's nothing that you need to take, right? It's just, there are things that may be a good idea. And the reason why I want to make this video is precisely because of the pushback that I got actually really proved why I needed to make this video, because people get very, very attached to their own supplementation regimen. And I think it's a kind of wanting validation that what they're spending their money on is worth it, that they're not just wasting their money. And what I find is that some people get very, very attached to certain vitamins or minerals that are usually like a kind of flavor of the month right now. They're all they are important, but they're no more important than anything else. And magnesium is very much the flavor of the month at the moment. And a lot of people take magnesium, but also a lot of professionals then usually because they've been told either by some influencer or a guru or, especially these wellness people, right? They get into people who are sort of like all into health and wellness. They often, we all use the word evidence-based and they often think they're being evidence-based, but they're not. They're following more like trends and certain influencers and gurus in that have a certain approach to things. And then what they do, whether they're a kind of nutritionist or like a wellness kind of like health person, or sometimes there was also physios that recommend recommend to all of their patients. They've had a good experience with magnesium, for example, and then they recommend to everyone that they work with that they should take magnesium, which is a really, really, really big leap in faith. But anyway, that's what a lot of people do. And the other thing is that some people get very attached to certain brands and think that, often more expensive brands, but they've really just fallen for the marketing, or somebody has told them that that's better than others. And then they get very, very attached to, obviously they're spending a lot of money on certain supplements and a certain brand. So it's very important to them to kind of make sure that they sometimes get quite aggressive as well. I got some quite aggressive feedback about taking cheap supplementation and them not being particularly high quality. But it's really just, somebody wants to validate the fact that they're spending lots of money, and they're probably spending a lot of money on things that they don't need, and they're not actually getting anything better quality than what I'm getting for a cheaper price. But they do need to kind of they need that validation that what they're doing is right. And people get into these sorts of things almost like religion, right? It's like it becomes a religion for them. It's like a blind faith that this is, really, really good, and nothing will convince them that they're wrong. And that's exactly why I wanted to make the post in the first place, is that I have so many clients coming to me being oh, I thought I needed to take this and I thought I needed to take that. And they're not necessary, or people being very confused because they've been told they need to take certain things and they don't. And people are very, very convincing and often very passionate about what you should take. So I wanted to go through, obviously in the post I explained what I think you don't need and what you might be a good idea. Notice the language I'm using as well. things that you probably don't need and things that you might need or that might be a good idea to invest in. Whenever we're talking about these things, we should be using that language. It shouldn't be you definitely need to. If someone's saying you definitely need to take magnesium or you 100% need to take a certain brand, right? That is almost never true when it comes to like health and fitness. And it's a really big red flag for anyone, like, anyone who's talking about any topic. If it's with 100% certainty, you probably shouldn't be listening to what they have to say. But anyway, these people who get very passionate about things and then recommend it to everyone. And I want to just create some clarity around what you probably don't need and what you might do. Okay, first of all, to go through a list of what you don't need to take, some things that are quite trendy at the moment: collagen, greens powders, fat burners, a probiotic, a pre-workout, Herbalife anything, or Juice Plus anything. These are like MLM schemes, multi-level marketing schemes. They're very unregulated. It's important to note that the supplement industry is extremely unregulated, which is why we need some guardrails and we need some this kind of thing of like what you probably don't need. And magnesium, and I also added to the list electrolytes. I am, first of all, what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go through what I think is worth taking, and then later on in this podcast, at the end, I'm going to talk about each one of those things and why I don't think you need them. So stay tuned for that if you want to know why you shouldn't take those things. Okay, so what is worth taking? I've got 4 things. Again, I've added something to my list since I did the post, but I've got 4 things that I would recommend to most people, and then another 4 things that I think a lot of and again, I'm talking about women, childbearing age, all of that kind of thing. But then 4 more things I think you should probably consider taking at certain times. So the first one is a multivitamin. So this will just cover all of your bases in terms of all of the vitamins and minerals that we tend to have like deficiencies of, or that it's quite hard to get. So there'll be some magnesium in it, there'll be some zinc in it, there'll be some iron in it. But it also, is a dose dependent thing. Where there are some things that if we take too much of it, it's dangerous for us. So, and there are some things that if we take too much, we just piss it out. So vitamin C is a good example. If you take too much vitamin C, your body just pisses out what you don't need. So there's no danger in taking too much. But things like vitamin A or iron, they accumulate in the body, and too much can also be bad for us. So, they will have small doses relatively of those things so that you don't end up with too much of it in the body. But a good multivitamin, and when I say a good multivitamin, just what you can get from your drugstore, right? Like, there's no evidence to show that like something that's more expensive is going to be better for you. Okay. Like it's again, the supplementation industry is completely unregulated. There's all kinds of stuff that people make all kinds of claims. So, it's really hard to know what's true and what's not. And in general, just multivitamin is good, will be good to go. It'll just cover your bases of all of the things that you need. And it's also a good idea to take a prenatal vitamin throughout those childbearing years because it has everything that you need. And honestly, if you get a men's multivitamin versus a woman's multivitamin versus a 60 plus multivitamin, there might be slight changes in what you need, but not huge differences from one thing to the next. The second thing that you should probably consider having is like an omega-3. Omega-3 is an essential fatty acid that is very hard to get through diet. There's a lot of it in salmon, famously, and it's in other things, like it's in eggs, and it's in other types of seafood, and it's in flax seeds and things like that. So these things are all good to be having in our diet. What we mean when we say an essential fatty acid is that there's lots and lots of different fatty acids, right? But a non-essential fatty acid is one that the body can make from other fatty acids. So if you aren't getting that through your diet, your body can still make it. Omega-3 is essential. So your body cannot make it from other fatty acids. So you have to get it through your diet. And most people do not get enough. So it's worth, unless you're having lots of salmon and sardines and things like that, it's worth having a supplement just to make sure that you are getting enough. Number 3 is folic acid. And if you are of childbearing age or want to have another kid or might have another kid, it's always worth having a folic acid. This will be covered by a prenatal, which is why it's a good idea to take, because if you accidentally you should take folic acid for 3 months before getting pregnant. And if you accidentally get pregnant, then you've already got some in your system. So you may or may not need to take one separately. It's usually given out at 400, is it milligrams or micrograms? I never remember which ones, which vitamin or mineral is whether it's micrograms or milligrams, but you need like 400 of these units a day, or like a doctor might prescribe a higher dosage. I needed 5 milligrams a day, so like way more. I think it's milligrams instead of micrograms. So way more than the average woman because of some medication I was taking. But your doctor will, unless your doctor tells you need more, you just need the 400 micrograms. And it's just a good idea to supplement that. Now, one of the criticisms I got was that you shouldn't take folic acid, you should take something else that's way better. Well, all government agencies and doctors and the medical system in Israel and in other countries recommends folic acid. So that's what I go by. I've never heard that there's something else that you should take that is superior. So that's those are the guidelines that I give. And again, this is exactly why I'm doing this podcast, because people will say, no, folic acid isn't good enough. You need to take this different type of it, like blah, blah, blah. Well, that as far as I know, the medical establishment hasn't even recognized that. So I'm not going to recommend something different to what a doctor or a gynecologist would recommend a pregnant or trying to conceive woman should take. So I haven't been given sufficient evidence to recommend anything else. And unless you have sufficient evidence, I wouldn't recommend, I certainly wouldn't take it myself, but I wouldn't recommend it to other women. I mean, this is another thing I find so fascinating about this topic, is that women will say with such certainty, no, you need to take this other thing. And you're actually recommending something that isn't recommended by the medical establishment to pregnant women. You're actually willing to make those recommendations. And this could put people's lives and health at risk. There's people who are anti-vaxxers. It's you have to be so certain before you're recommending something that the establishment doesn't recommend. So I'm really amazed at people's confidence to say, no, you should be taking something else instead of this very mainstream thing that we have a lot of evidence for. And it was the same with magnesium. I'm so you don't tell your clients to take a multivitamin, but you tell them that they need to take high dose magnesium. Where is the evidence for that? And it's they don't actually have evidence. And I think this is another problem, is that we all love to say we're evidence-based and what the evidence says and what the research says. But what I find is that so many people will just say, well, the research shows that, blah, 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 blah. And they don't actually know. Look, at the end of the day, I'm not somebody who's going through reading every single research paper on magnesium or different supplements or whatever. And neither are you, and neither are most people who are making these recommendations. Let's face it. So you have to you have to take it from the body of knowledge that we have. And so I just find it very frustrating that people can just say, well, the research shows that you need to take it. And you're okay, which research? They obviously don't know. And I can't provide the research either. But that's part of the time that we live in, that people love throwing that expression around. But very few people actually know what the research says and go through and trawling through it all. So anyway, but I digress, but that is just a little bit of a rant that is relevant to this topic. And the fourth and final thing that everyone should take, and I didn't include this on my post because I didn't think of it at the time, but is iodized salt. Okay, so iodized salt is iodine is a mineral that we all need, and like 100 years ago or something, like, or 70 years ago, whatever, it was the most common deficiency in the Western world, okay, is iodine deficiency, and it causes all sorts of health problems. And so what governments did is they added iodine to salt, to just regular table salt, which meant that people were cooking with iodized salt and using it and sprinkling it on their food. And so people were getting enough iodine just from adding it to the salt. And this was actually the most successful public health initiative ever, right? In the history of the world. It still is the most successful public health initiative. And what that means, how do you measure the most successful public health initiative? It's like the cost versus the outcome. So it pretty much, this initiative eradicated iodine deficiency in the Western world. And it cost almost nothing. Like per person, it cost like 1 penny per person or something like that, right? It was like a really cheap. If you compare it to, say, vaccines, for example, that were a hugely successful public health initiative, completely eradicated lots of diseases, lots of infectious diseases, but often they were quite expensive, right? This was a really inexpensive public health initiative. And recently, in the past sort of decade, we have this backlash, right? A lot of you, if you've listened to a lot of my podcasts, you'll hear me say, be the balance. Don't be the counterbalance to the things that you don't like, right? Be the balance that you want to see in the world. And we see a lot of backlash of going back to, healthy eating or natural foods. And a lot of the time it's a really good thing, right? I am a 1990s child. We ate frankfurters like bought in a plastic thing that we microwaved and had on like long life bread that wouldn't, it's probably, if I left it on the side, it probably wouldn't have rotted today. We lived off McDonald's and like chicken nuggets that you threw in the microwave or in the oven. Like, we ate a lot of shit, right? And frosted cereals and things like that, right? We ate a lot of crap, and it's definitely a good thing that we have more nutrition knowledge and we're kind of trying to eat like less, foods with less preservatives and less junk in them and less sugar and blah, 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 blah. But sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater. And one of the ways that we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater is that a lot of people are like, don't have iodized salt, it's really bad for you. And this is what kosher salt is, right? Kosher salt doesn't have iodine in it. So in an American context, that's why a lot of American recipes call for kosher salt, because it doesn't have iodine in it. But this is like completely pointless. It doesn't make the salt better quality. It just means that you and your family are probably not getting enough iodine, right? And that's a shame. You can just buy iodized salt. I think in Israel, you have to actually buy it. It's got a purple, it's packaging on it. So you want to buy that type of salt, and if you're cooking pasta, if you've got some table salt, whatever, like just use that. It's super cheap, and you don't need, this is another thing, you don't need expensive like Himalayan salt or anything like that. And this is another thing where like the health benefits are wildly overstated. So the claim is with Himalayan sea salt, for example, is that it has lots and lots of nutrients in it for you. It has lots of minerals in it, like magnesium and a bunch of different ones. But the thing is that they exist in trace amounts. Okay, trace means that there's very, very little of it in there, right? It's nothing that will even affect, I mean, if you're going to take a magnesium supplement, it would be like 500 milligrams or whatever. Like, it's in trace. That means it's not even like 1 milligram in Himalayan sea salt. So like what it is it's marketed at there are lots of things like this that are like marketed to the worried well, right? The middle class women who, they want to be feeding their family the best quality ingredients. And so we end up paying a ton of money for like Himalayan sea salt, which is also incidentally terrible for the environment because it's flown halfway across the world. And then, food, like from the other parts of the world, it's flown to the Himalayas so that they've got salt, right? It's completely, if you've ever heard me talk about quinoa, that's another big problem that I have with quinoa, is that it's flown from Bolivia. It's the local food of the Bolivians. They can't afford it anymore, so then they have to buy rice from China. And it's all bonkers, especially when we're living in a world where we're super worried about climate change and we've got all of these initiatives to stop us from using oil and gas and fossil fuels, and then we're flying sea salt from the other side of the world, right? When literally any country in the world can produce salt, and you can buy it from a few miles away rather than halfway across the world. It's completely pointless, and it's always funny when people put like Himalayan sea salt in their water to drink. Again, completely pointless because it's just trace amounts of these elements and minerals that are not going to affect your health in any way, shape or form. So long story short, buy iodized salt. Don't bother buying the expensive sea salt like Malvern and all of that shit. Complete waste of money. Okay, then let's talk about the 4 things that you might consider taking at certain times, okay? Or that some people may need to take some of the time, but I wouldn't say those 4 things are 4 things I'd say all women of childbearing age, they're the things that you should take, right? And they're the only things, and I mean, take iodized salt is just something to have in your house, right? Like you're not taking a thing every day. And also iodine will be included in a multivitamin, right? So but these are the only things that I would say everyone should take. Obviously these are very general guidelines as well. And obviously I'm not talking about if you actually have had a blood test and you have a deficiency in something. Obviously if you have a deficiency in something, then and your doctor's seen it, go and take that thing. So, I had low levels of iron at one point. So I got iron. I took iron supplementation for a while. I also had low levels of vitamin B12 after my third was born. So I took high dose vitamin B12 for a period. But these things are included in a multivitamin. And unless you have a deficiency that you are aware of, you don't need to take anything else, right? All these individual things like, a zinc supplement or a magnesium supplement, right? Yes, these minerals are important, but they are no more important than any other thing, right? Every mineral in the body, every vitamin in the body is involved in lots and lots of metabolic and physiological processes in the body. We need all of them. There aren't any specific things that you should take over other things unless you have a deficiency. Anyway, let's move on to the 4 things that you should consider some of the time. So high dose vitamin C when you're sick. The body uses up vitamin C more when you're overcoming illness. So it can be a good idea to take up to 1 gram of vitamin C a day. You can take it I have high dose, so 500 milligrams. I take it twice a day when I'm sick. It's also important to take your multivitamin if you're sick, because we use up all vitamins a lot more when we're unwell. But taking higher dose vitamin C is probably a good idea when you're sick. Number 2 is creatine. If you lift, okay, if you lift weights, creatine is a thing that's in our muscles that we use up at very high rates when we're lifting weights. So the body needs to renew it before your next set. So taking creatine, I think 3 grams up to 5 grams a day is a good idea. If you don't lift weights, there is probably no point taking creatine. I know there's a lot of noise right now around creatine that it might be good for, mental, concentration or things like that. But I think this is very, very unlikely. I don't think there's much evidence to back that up. And look, supplement companies that discover things, obviously people who lift weights and who are into working out are a really good market for supplements because they are health conscious and they also want to lift better and things like that. They want a bit of an advantage. So they often they're obviously a really good market for supplements, but the problem is that that's a very small amount of the population. So supplementation companies have a really big interest in finding things that are good for everyone, right? Or marketing things that are going to be good for everyone. So, that's why they push things like creatine, or that they tried to do research on the mental benefits of creatine and things like that, because they want to market it to a much bigger audience. But I don't think there's any evidence to show that creatine is any good for you if you don't lift weights. But it may give you, I've started taking creatine in the past few months, and my recovery has improved. I'm lifting heavier weights. There are compounding factors, and it's hard to say that it's definitely because of the creatine, and this is purely anecdotal. Notice those caveats, right? So I'm not saying, I've taken creatine. I feel pretty convinced that creatine has been really, really positive for me, but I'm still very, very, very cautious when I'm talking about the benefits. I'm aware that there might be other reasons why my lifting has improved other than the creatine. I include those caveats. I say things like it's probably a good idea if you're a lifter, but I don't say everyone should take it and it's definitely, improved my lifting and blah, 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 which is what a lot of people do with things like magnesium, okay? So you've got to watch for that language. Are people giving you caveats? Are people sort of being cautious with their recommendations, or are they just being completely 100% definitely take this? Then I think you should be a little bit cautious of what they're saying. Okay, so number 3 is whey protein powder. So protein is incredibly important for a healthy diet. So are fats. But the difference between fats and protein is that fats are really, really easy to get through the diet. And in actual fact, it's very easy to get too many fats through diet alone. And most women do eat way too much fat, right? We've got a bit of a narrative of how important fats are for good health. But then women tend to eat far too many grams of fats a day, and that often ends up adding lots of calories to their diet that aren't really necessary. But with protein, it is actually difficult to hit ideal or optimum levels of protein, and protein is incredibly important for literally everything in the body. Obviously, if you're lifting heavy weights and you want to build muscle, bone density, connective tissue, if you want to get stronger, then protein is going to be a really important part of that. But protein isn't just for building muscle, right? It's for every single other for many processes and tissues in the body. Connective tissue is made up joints and tendons and ligaments and fascia and our hair, our nails, our skin. Lots and lots of proteins are used in these tissues as well. And we need quite a lot of protein in our diet to get enough levels, and most women simply aren't getting enough. So absolute minimum, what's recommended to the RDA is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight. But that's exceptionally low, okay? That's how much you need to avoid disease and malnutrition. So if you weigh 60 kilos, it's going to be something 80% of that, something like 45 grams or something like that. It's not very much, and it's certainly not ideal. But if we want, ideal or optimum levels of protein, we want to be looking more towards 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight, okay? Obviously, there are lots and lots of, meathead, gym people, bodybuilding, blah, 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 that actually recommend a much higher level than that. I don't think there's much evidence that you need more than that, even if you are a very, very, advanced weightlifter. You still probably don't need or won't benefit from more than 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, although it may be, it won't do you any harm. That's for sure. If you aren't a lifter, then you might not be able to utilize that much protein. You might only need something like 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if you weigh 60 kilos, or if 60 kilos is your goal weight, then that might look like something like 80 grams of protein a day. So there's a range where protein is sufficient for overall health. You need more of it if you do want to build and maintain muscle mass. But most women are not getting anywhere near enough. Hence, a protein powder can be a very useful supplement, okay? So it's just a very, very, very bioavailable, very easily digested, and a very high quality protein that you can add to your diet, okay? So it's not something that you have to have every day, but it can help fill in the gaps if you are struggling to get enough protein. Now, a few things. I think it's incredibly important to get whey protein powder, okay? There's lots of different protein powders available, but you want to get whey, okay? W-H-E-Y. Whey protein powder is made from milk, and it's a very, very high quality protein. It has a very good amino acid profile, which means, there are lots of different amino acids that we need, and they all exist in high numbers in whey protein powder. It has a very high amount of leucine, which is especially important for muscle growth. If you compare whey protein to other types of protein powders, so an egg protein powder or one that's based on plant protein in particular, it is just much more bioavailable. It's just much more easily absorbed. The amino acids are much more easily absorbed, and it's cheaper, okay? Plant-based protein powders tend to be much more expensive, and they tend to not have as good an amino acid profile. They don't have enough leucine in them. And they also tend to be very gloopy. Like they make the shake very gloopy or grainy or both, and they're really, really gross. Whereas whey blends in much, much better. Again, this is a supplement. This is meant to supplement your diet. So the best way to get protein and good quality protein is to eat protein-rich foods. So for me, on an ideal day, I'll get all of my protein from yogurt, from chicken, from beef, from eggs, from dairy products. That would be ideal. And it really isn't very hard to get around 100 grams of protein a day from real food, okay? From just those real food sources. 100 grams is, for the average woman, is 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. Most women need around 190 to 110, depending on your weight, but basically, it's very easy to get that from whole foods. But if you are struggling to get that, or if you want to get more, then it can be a good idea to add in a whey protein powder. Each scoop will be like 25 grams of protein. It always tastes disgusting just mixed with water, okay? So, the real gym meatheads will just chuck it back with some water after their workout. That's not necessary to do. I make a really delicious banana milkshake with fresh banana or frozen banana, 200 milliliters of milk, a scoop of protein powder, and a load of ice, and it is absolutely delicious. Vanilla flavored protein powder. It's like drinking a milkshake. It's really delicious. It's sweet. It's yummy, and it's great in the summer. And another one that I make is a berry milkshake with like 200 grams of berries and a pot of yogurt, like 150 grams of yogurt, and then and soy milk, and half a scoop of protein powder. Why half a scoop of protein powder? Because there is protein in the soy milk, there's protein in the yogurt that I'm putting in, and so the protein powder is just a supplement to that, okay? So I'm just adding an extra 12, 13 grams just to bump that protein content up and make it more like a complete meal. That's how I would recommend consuming protein powders. I have tried them, in overnight oats, which I fucking hate anyway. I've tried mixing them into oats. I've tried mixing them into yogurt, like putting them in pancakes, all of the things that, people recommend doing online. And I think it's all a load of rubbish. It always makes all of those things taste really, really gross. Just keep it simple. Just to stick to shakes sometimes when you need an extra bit of protein. And make sure that it's something that actually tastes good, that it's a well-rounded meal, that you're actually going to get satisfied from it, rather than something that you kind of have to choke down. And please, please, please remember, just get whey, okay? People spend so much money on plant-based protein powders. Obviously, if you're a vegan or if you can't tolerate dairy, you're going to have to get some other option. But if you don't, just get whey protein, just get the one that's available in your supermarket, in your drugstore, like in Decathlon, whatever, in your sports shop. It really doesn't need to be complicated. It's whey or whey isolate. Like, don't buy anything more fancy than that. Certainly don't buy anything that's more expensive than that, because it's just a con. And the final one that some people should consider taking some of the time is a fiber supplement. Again, what's the best way to get fiber? The best way to get enough fiber in your diet is eating lots and lots of fresh fruit and vegetables. They are very high in fiber. A mistake that a lot of people make is they try to get fiber from whole grains. Whole grains have some fiber in it, but they are not a particularly good source of fiber. Not when you do a ratio of amount of fiber to calories. Okay, so it's fine to get a bit of extra fiber from whole grains, but they should not be your main source. If you're relying on whole grains for fiber, then you are probably going to be constipated. You're not going to have very good digestive health. You need lots and lots of fruit and vegetables. And this is something that people struggle with. They struggle to eat enough fruit and vegetables because they're just not, look, let's face it, especially vegetables, they don't taste amazing, right? Especially if you're just like chopping them up raw or whatever. And we need far more than we think or we're used to eating in a modern diet. So you do just need lots and lots of fruit and vegetables. Legumes, beans, lentils, peas, these are also a good protein, not a good protein source. They are not a good protein source, and they're a good carbohydrate source. They're a good source of fiber, definitely to include in your diet, but also don't have too much, because, you know, if you have 500 grams of bean soup or lentil soup, you are going to have some real digestive issues, right? So I can't tolerate beans in high quantities. I can add like 100 grams of beans to a meal, like to a salad or something, and I'm fine digesting that. But if I'm eating huge quantities of beans, I get really, really gassy and bloated, and it's really uncomfortable. So you need to get protein, I keep saying protein, fiber from fruits and vegetables, and to some degree, a little bit from whole grains, and some from like legumes and things like that. If you struggle to get enough fiber and then you end up constipated, guess what? You can have a fiber supplement. It's just fiber that goes into your digestive tract. And so it can be helpful, especially if on one particular day you know that you didn't get enough fiber, so you could just have it in the evening just to help you stay regular. Absolutely not a essential thing. It's just helpful if you do struggle to get fiber, especially if you have very busy days or something like that. Okay, so that is it. That's my complete list. And the reason why I haven't included things like magnesium or zinc or vitamin B12 or vitamin D or any of those things is because they are all things that if you have a deficiency, you should have them. They're all important, right? But unless you have a deficiency, you probably don't need to have a high dose supplement of any of those things, okay? So that's why I've not included them on those lists, because they just aren't, a multivitamin is a very general recommendation, right? It's just gonna cover a lot of bases if you don't have any obvious deficiencies or health problems. But taking high dose magnesium or whatever, like that is just a bit of a shot in the dark. And I also want to emphasize again, before I move on to what not to take and why. So first thing I want to emphasize is, yes, if you have other deficiencies that show up in a blood test, yes, if the doctor recommends to take something, take it by all means. In terms of real food, the next point I want to make is the best way of getting all of these vitamins and minerals and nutrients is through your diet, right? Eating real food first. It's best to clean up your diet. You should be eating your meals should be providing you with nutrients. I don't bang on about this very much because I talk a lot about fat loss, but it is actually important to be getting nutrients through your diet. There's only 5 things you need from your diet, and that is protein, fat, micronutrients, which include vitamins and minerals, fiber, and water. Okay, those are the 5 things you need to be healthy, and they're the 5 things you need to get through your diet. Supplements are, drum roll please, to supplement your diet. Okay, they fill in the gaps. So you can use them to fill in the gaps if your diet is a bit questionable, of course, but and especially if you're sort of starting to make some changes, it can be good to take those supplements to fill in the gaps as you build a more healthy diet and get more used to eating more whole foods. Let's move on to what not to take. I'm going to go back to the list that I had in the beginning and go through them one by one and explain why not to take them. Okay, so first and foremost, collagen. Collagen is a really popular supplement at the moment. It's marketed a lot to women for joint health, but also for skin, hair, nails, that kind of thing. Collagen is a protein, and it is a very important protein in all of our, in skin, hair, nails, and all of our connective tissue, like joints and things like that. Okay, it is an incredibly important protein, but proteins are complicated structures. They are made up there. They have 4 layers of structure. So the first layer is the amino acids, and there's like 21 or something like that amino acids that we need through our diet. Okay, and then each different protein is made up of a different combination of certain amino acids, and then they have a shape and they fold back on each other and whatever, and you get a complicated protein. Now, the reason why collagen supplements are not recommended is because when you ingest something like collagen into your digestive tract, when you ingest any protein, so if you eat chicken, for example, and that goes into your digestive tract, guess what? Our digestive system is built to break down proteins. What does it break them down into? It breaks them down into individual amino acids. So the idea behind collagen supplements is that you ingest collagen as a complete protein, and then it somehow gets through your digestive tract intact, and then it gets to your to your tissues intact as collagen whole. Sorry, that is not how digestion works. That's not how the human body works. The digestive tract, starting with the stomach, with stomach acid, and then like a whole load of different things as it goes along. So it actually starts with the saliva in the mouth. It breaks down, your digestive system is built to break down complicated long chains of proteins into individual amino acids. So then you have those amino acids in your bloodstream, in your body, and your body transports the individual amino acids through the blood to the sites in the body where you need to grow hair or grow nails or new skin or build muscle, right? And there's like the body transports it to those areas, and then the body takes at those sites, takes those individual amino acids and builds whole proteins from those building blocks. What it doesn't do is it doesn't take the protein whole through your digestive tract to the place where collagen or whatever other complex protein structure is needed. Collagen is also not a particularly good quality protein source because it doesn't have a very good amino acid profile. So again, going back to whey protein powder, it has all of the amino acids that we need. It has them in high quantities, and it also has a lot of leucine in it, which is particularly important for muscle growth. Whereas collagen as a protein, it doesn't have a very good amino acid profile. So it may have some, I'm not 100% sure, but like may have some missing, or it doesn't quite have it in enough quantities, and it has a lower level of leucine. So it is a poorer quality protein, okay? Because remember, your body is just going to break it down into amino acids. So if you take whey protein, you're going to have, if you take a scoop of whey protein versus like a portion of collagen, you're going to end up with all of the amino acids that you have in collagen, and then some more, okay? So if you're taking a collagen supplement, but you're not getting enough protein in your diet and you're not supplementing with whey protein powder, then you're wasting your money. You don't need collagen. You need to make sure you're getting enough protein first. And if you're not getting quite enough protein, you can bump it up with whey protein powder. Way more inexpensive, way more available, and way more bioavailable, way more easy for the body to break down, much more leucine content. It's just a far superior protein. Okay, number 2 is greens powders. So I don't quite know how these became a thing, because the idea is that you take loads of greens and vegetables and this, that, and the other. You dry them, you turn them into a powder, and then you eat them like that. Now, apart from other things, you're going to have, like, again, the supplementation industry is highly unregulated. There's no, like, we just have very little evidence that all of the goodness of fruits and veg are still going to be present when they've been dried and smushed up into a powder. And it's just often really funny that it's often promoted by people who talk about like processed food and cutting processed foods out, and then they promote these highly processed things, these supplements. If you want to get a good if you're worried about getting sufficient nutrients, you're much better off just getting a multivitamin over greens powders. And if you aren't getting enough fiber in your diet, you're much better off getting a simple fiber supplement. Obviously better to get these things through your actual diet, but if you're going to supplement, that's what I would supplement with. That's why those two things are on my original list and not greens powders. There's very little evidence that anything is going to be left in a greens powder by the time it gets to the end result, which is a powder. Okay, number 3 is fat burners. Fat burners usually just have caffeine in them, which does increase your metabolic rate a little bit, but you could just drink coffee. There's really no evidence that fat burners work. You still need to be in a calorie deficit. You're just much better off focusing your energy on being in a calorie deficit. There's no way of cheating the system, right? You can't cheat the laws of physics. If you're not in a calorie deficit and you're taking fat burners, you won't be losing fat. And if you are taking fat burners while being in a calorie deficit, it's probably a waste because it's not going to make you burn fat faster than if you were just in a calorie deficit. Okay, the next one also often makes people angry, but a probiotic, okay? So, you can take pills or whatever that supposedly have hundreds of thousands of different bacteria. The problem is again, our digestive system gets in the way, okay? So where we need the bacteria, the good bacteria, all of that kind of stuff, is in our large intestine. It's right at the end of the digestive system, okay? So our body has to the bacteria or the probiotics have to get all the way through your digestive system, right? Which, remember, you put it in your mouth and the first stop is your stomach, and your stomach is filled with acid, very, very, very strong acid, that kills off germs and, guess what? Bacteria. So there's actually very little evidence that probiotics actually get through the stomach into the large intestine. They're very, very popular, and they're very popular with like wellness people. So that, like, this is one of that I find people get angry about as well, because they're very, very religious about probiotics, and they recommend that everyone takes probiotics. But again, there's just very little evidence that it will actually get through the digestive system. You're much better off eating things like yogurt and kefir, and also prebiotics, right? The bacteria in our gut feeds off of fiber that we eat, that's in fruit and vegetables. So that's the stuff that you need, and you need a wide variety of different fibers, which is why it's a good idea to have whole grains, and it's a good idea to have beans and pulses and things like that. And that's what our good bacteria feeds off of, and that's what we need, and that will make it through the digestive tract. So it's really important to eat those things. If you've been told by a doctor or whatever to take a probiotic, it's probably not going to do you any harm, and some of it might work, but just as a general thing, especially if you're just generally fine, it probably isn't going to do anything. And it's certainly not something you need to take for just general health. What are we on? 5 is a pre-workout. Pre-workouts don't really have much in them beyond, like, sometimes they're a mixture. They usually have caffeine in them, creatine, and sometimes they have like electrolytes or something like that as like an isotonic drink. Really, all you need is, if you're taking creatine separately, you don't need a pre-workout. If you like the caffeine in a pre-workout, fine, but you could just drink black coffee and it will do the same thing. So it's definitely not something, it doesn't do anything special. Number 6, Herbalife. Anything to do with Herbalife, any MLM schemes like Juice Plus and all of those ones, they're extremely unregulated. They're usually replacement shakes and meal replacement things and like whatever. They don't have anything magical in them. They aren't particularly good for you. They're often just protein powders. You could probably get a far cheaper protein powder just from your local drugstore or whatever. So there isn't any reason to invest in, and normally they're a kind of all or nothing kind of scheme. You either have to get the whole package or you don't get anything. A waste of money. Number 7, this is the one that everyone gets really angry about, but magnesium. Again, I haven't seen evidence that everyone needs to take high dose magnesium. There's some evidence to say that it might be helpful if you do very, very intense workouts. But again, you should be getting magnesium through your diet. You'll get a bit of magnesium from a multivitamin. And it's just that it's not more important than all the other minerals and vitamins. And a lot of people sort of recommend it for sleep. I don't think there's a huge amount of evidence that that's the case, or for muscle cramps, but there are other things that are that can cause muscle cramps, or deficiencies of things that can cause muscle cramps, or just not getting enough salt, for example, can cause muscle cramps. So if you're sort of sweating loads and then drinking lots of water and you're not getting enough salt in your diet, then you're not going to have that can often cause like cramps, like muscle cramps. So it could be magnesium, but it could be something else. So yeah, it's not something that everyone needs to take all the time. I think that's just a really ridiculous claim and isn't backed up by anything. And finally, electrolytes. Electrolytes are also really hot at the moment. And I follow some people who are like, did you know just drinking water isn't enough to hydrate yourself? You need to be getting electrolytes as well. And they drink electrolytes like every day or several times a day. And they, spike their water with these packets of electrolytes. And you know what? You just don't need it. Do you know when you might need electrolytes? If you are a long distance marathon runner and you're running in the heat or whatever, that's a time when you might need electrolytes, okay? Because we sweat out. What are electrolytes? They're basically like minerals that we sweat out. And if we just drink water, if you're running for 4 hours in the heat and you're sweating out all of these minerals and all of these electrolytes, they're salts, and all these electrolytes, then you want to replace them, because just drinking water won't replace the electrolytes. So that's when electrolytes are really helpful. Another time that it could possibly be beneficial to take electrolytes, but not like totally 100% like sure that this is true, is after giving birth, okay? And in particular after a C-section. So I did this after my third. Before I gave birth, I knew I was having a planned C-section again. And what happened with my first two is that I got very dehydrated. I got really constipated. So a combination of two things. I wasn't drinking enough water, and I was also eating a shit diet, like in a very stodgy diet. So I was like, I'm postpartum, I just had a baby, so I'm just gonna eat all these chocolates and cakes that people are bringing me, and I'm not gonna eat anything healthy. And I ended up dehydrated and constipated. And if you've had a C-section, you'll know how painful constipation pains are after a C-section. They are worse than the C-section pain itself. So with my third, I was determined to be way more clever about this. And I went and I went to a sports shop. I bought some electrolytes, just tablets that you put in water. And I decided I was going to have electrolytes for the first couple of weeks. And I had one with caffeine, one without caffeine. The one with caffeine I had in the morning, the one without caffeine I had later on in the day. And that was it, right? I just decided, I drank a shit ton of water as well, but I decided to have electrolytes once or twice a day on top of that. Now, the other thing that I did is that I ate regular meals from day one. From the moment I had the C-section, I focused on protein and fiber. So most of my meals were just like, say, a yogurt and some fruit for breakfast, like a clementine. Lunch was like a piece of chicken and half a plate full of vegetables, and I would kind of leave the carbohydrates. Afternoon snack, like a couple of boiled eggs and a couple of pieces of fruit. Dinner, a bit of meat and vegetables and a bit of carbs. Like that's what I had that in the hospital. And then when I got home, I tried to really prioritize that kind of diet. So high protein, high high like fiber content of my meals. So, can I say with 100% certainty, oh, it's because of the electrolytes that I didn't get dehydrated this time? No, I also just drank a shit ton of water. And was it that made me not get constipated? Well, no, because I also ate a high fiber diet. I cut out the stodge because I just didn't need it and it was hard on my digestion. And I also took a fiber supplement the week before the birth and then the week after the birth as well to help me make sure that I go to the toilet. So I did a lot of things, right? I did sort of 3 different things to stop constipation from happening. So was it one of those things or was it a combination of all 3 of those things? We'll never know. That's the thing, is it's hard to know what works and what doesn't because there's a lot of confounding factors. But it could potentially be a good idea to include electrolytes when you're postpartum, but you need to drink a ton of water as well. And it can help to drink more water because they make the water taste good. They usually have flavorings, which makes it just a little bit more interesting to drink. So yeah, all in all, like that might be a good time to drink, to take electrolytes, but again, notice how the language that I'm using, there's no certainty here. This is just, it might help, it could help, it might be worth it for you, it might be worth giving it a go. It certainly won't do any harm, but we mustn't overinflate like what these things do. Okay, so that was a long one. I just wanted to clear up what's probably worth your while and what isn't. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. If you want to know, more about certain supplement, or if there are some supplements that maybe I didn't mention here and you want to know whether they're worth taking, just pop it in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer. Thanks for listening.